difficult. And that's why we're part of a community, and we're calling this series Coming Home, because we feel like despite the fact that there's lots of us who gather on a Sunday, that actually many of us don't feel like we're home yet. Fine with God, but we've got no brothers and sisters that we know the names of. And that's got to change for you to feel like this is your place. I do believe with all my heart that God is going to keep sending to us people from everywhere else, including Chaddeston, everywhere else, so that we can feel and grow and know what it is to welcome and love people. You say, well, I've been trying to do that all my life. Yeah, I know. But we need to do it more now than we've ever done. That pandemic has really impacted our ability to connect and know each other. When I was saying last week or the week before, I can't remember, I think about encouraging people to come to the front and respond. And I said, look, we're going to do this. And I was thinking in my heart that it was more to do with getting back into a rhythm of response, of responding to what you hear that God is saying to you. Rather than saying, right, now I'm here, we're going to do this. It's not about that. It's about responses of heart. And that's really what we're after here. If you've got a Bible, turn to Luke chapter 15. And we're going to delve into the greatest story, probably the greatest parable ever told. And it's a parable, it's one parable in three parts. Although it looks like it's three parables, actually it's one parable in three parts. And I'm just going to get us off and running with verses 1 and 2. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." I don't know if you understand quite what the deal is here, but the audience he was speaking to were Pharisees and scribes, religious people and teachers of the law in first century Palestine. They actually believed that they could be righteous, sinless, because they measured their sinlessness according to the law. And if they did the Day of Atonement once a year and participated in that, then they were clean and clear. Their complaint was this, that Jesus receives sinners and tax collectors and eats with them. Sinners were the unclean breakers of the law. So you can't sit and eat with people who are sinners because you might get contaminated. Think COVID, but with sin. And you can't sit and eat with them because it's going to reflect badly on you, and you won't be able to participate in worship if you've contaminated yourself with being with sinners. But then you've got the scribe and the Pharisee watching Jesus' life, and wherever Jesus goes, he happens to eat with people. So, to eat with another person in the Middle East is a sacramental act, signifying acceptance on a very deep level. Now, my brothers, particularly from the Middle East and other cultures who are represented in this place this morning, will know this better than me. But I know this, is that when you sit down and eat with somebody and open up your table, you don't just open up your table for a meal, you open up your heart. That's why we're not a proper family yet if you've not had people around the table. You say, well, what do you mean? I'm saying that we've got to grow in inviting people to the table. Now, it might be you can't get people in your house, perhaps. Maybe you're a bit unsure about hospitality. Maybe you've never been very good at it. It doesn't really matter. You could have a coffee with someone after the meeting. You're not entertaining in the sense that you put on a big spread that costs you loads of money. You're talking about eating together whatever you've got, and you join in and eat that. And sometimes people bring the food with them to help you along. Got it? Okay. So, Jesus tells one parable in three parts. And then he moves on here, and he starts to show them his response to the accusation that he doesn't take sin seriously. You don't take sin seriously like us because you're sitting down and eating with sinners and you're getting contaminated by sitting with them. And he says, here's my response. And he tells a parable in 3 parts. First parable is about the lost sheep. Suppose one of you had 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep till he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. That's the lost sheep. Can you see that? Perfect illustration. That's probably in Wales because it's raining. Did you? All right, Priya. Abuse from the cheap seats. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me. So he finds the sheep, gets the sheep, carries the sheep back all the way home, brings it back and says, right, I've got it. There is a question around who looked after the 99. But we'll leave that for the moment. It's a theological issue. But Jesus gets the one, puts it over the shoulders, as it were, brings it back, and 1 out of 100 is saved, and it's wonderful. And then the guy says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a party to celebrate. You go shepherd, having a party. He loves it. Look at the next part of the parable. Or, suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the home, search carefully till she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, rejoice with me. I found my lost coin. In the same way, I tell you, there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. 100 sheep, one goes missing, gets found. It's cause for celebration and opening up your home. 10 coins, one goes missing. A coin would have been about a day's wages, so now it's getting more expensive, and the need to find it is like vital. So she's on her knees and she's proper looking. The coin doesn't just pop up and land and say, hooray, that's great. She has to go looking. Look at that. Are you one of those people who always look for a quid on the floor? This parable honors that. If you're picking up 5p's, though, there might be a problem. Okay, I do it. I do it. I pick up a 5 if I see it. So there's a woman on her knees. It involves some effort, and 1 in 10 means that it's a bit more valuable. These 2 stories deal with the question of God's attitude towards sinners. God's attitude towards the sinners and the tax collectors is that they are very valuable to him. And he's searching diligently to find those who are lost. And when he finds them, he celebrates with a party. Not enough parties in our church. Now, Jesus tells another part of the parable that's directed right at the Pharisees' self-righteous attitude. It's about the lost son. Now it's 1 of 2. And now this is really expensive, valuable, and vital. A man had 2 sons. The younger one said to the father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. And not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild or extravagant living. Remember that word. After he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods, and the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, no longer worthy to call your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Just a couple of clarifications. Hired servant is like a craftsman. It's like somebody who you get in to do a job, like a carpenter, a joiner, or a bricklayer, or a painter and decorator. It's somebody who's time served. Okay? I can't go into that now, but that's the deal. So, we're at the point where the son says, I'll get up and go to the father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, filled with compassion for him, ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. And we'll go into that a little bit more. So, A man had two sons. Often there was tension between the eldest and the youngest around inheritance. The eldest got 2/3 in a Jewish family, and the youngest got 1/3. So there's likely a bit of tension between younger and older anyway. What we don't know is the whole story. We don't know the build-up, we don't know what happens afterwards. What we get is this picture that Jesus paints, which is the greatest story ever told. We call it the prodigal son, but it's more like the father's love, the father's great compassion. The younger son says, "Give me my share of the estate." This is like our Dan or Joel saying to me, "Hey, sell the house. Give me my share now." We go, "Well, we're selling the house. It's on the market. If you want to buy it, let me know." But if it's like, "Oh my goodness, sell the house. I want my money." What would you say? Well, what would I say? I'd say, "Clear off. Go and get a job, earn your own money, and we'll see you later. And there might be something for you in the will. But because you've asked, it'll be a bit less." Dad, in response, "Why don't you drop dead now?" The son chose deliberately to wound his father's heart and break all his relationship with the family. That's what's going on here. Why does he do this? Because he doubts the capability and goodness of his father. He thinks he can do a better job of managing his own life than the father can. What's being done here is inappropriate. It's wrong at every level, and that's why Jesus is telling the story. An Oriental dad would probably chase his son out of the village with the back of his hand saying, "Clear off. You're no longer a son of mine. You have chosen you've chosen to say that you'd rather live without me so you can. Bang. And I'll chase you out of town." The whole village would have been right behind the dad. Clear off. We can't have those values in this village. This is who we are, and we don't do that. And children don't do that to fathers. I heard a story the other day of a guy who had, this happened in his own family. I think he was Syrian. And he was in a village, and this happened. The younger son came to the father and said, "I'd like my share, I want to go." And the father chased him out of the village and chased him out of the home, and everybody was in agreement. The older son and the middle son in this instance represented the young lad to the father for 5 years before the father would even meet him again. That's what's going on here. Now, they did resolve it, as I understand. So obviously, what's the dad going to do? Well, everyone who's hearing the story for the first time says, well, he's obviously going to chase him out. But the father grants the request. He says, look, verse 13. I can't even count, 12. So he divided his property between them. So he did it. He sold up or, cashed the ices or whatever you do, and kind of got the money, gave it to the lad, and the lad went off to a distant country. No one ever had heard of a story like that. No one would ever have done it. And of course, the older son doesn't sell his part. He keeps it. No patriarch would have done any of these things. Therefore, what is Jesus up to? What's going on? This goes beyond the picture of normal relations and shows, in fact, what he's after is showing a new and fuller understanding of who God is. He's much better than an Oriental dad. He's much better than a British dad. He's much better than any of us. And that's what he's trying to show. He's saying, tax collectors and sinners, you don't think that I take sin seriously? Let me tell you how it looks to me. It's like somebody lost a sheep and they go and find it, and then there's a party to celebrate. It's like a coin gets lost in a household of a widow, and she finds it and she celebrates. It's like when a Jewish son goes rogue and wants you dead. Everyone goes, I'm listening. Well, the Father says, have the money. Have the money? Have you lost your mind? Are you going crazy? No, have the money. Because God the Father Jesus here, represented in the Father, is saying, I want to be where the sinners are. I want a relationship to always be open. No matter how far you've gone away from God this morning or this week, no matter how hard your heart is right now to your old family or to God, God's keeping the channels of relationship wide open for you today. It's wide open. And if you started walking back to him, he'd start running to you. And when he does that, if you ever arrived all the way back, he'd have a party to celebrate. The prodigal can't believe his luck. That's my guess. He's not the prodigal at this point. He's just a younger son who's a rebel and a rogue. He's got to sell. Maybe he was given property. I don't know. But if he had been given property, he's got to sell it in a hurry at a knockdown price. This inheritance he's receiving has been built up in the family, in that village for generations. And this kid is now going to sell it all so he could go wherever he wants, marry whoever he wants. But he knows this, that if he loses all of the money in the land of the Gentiles, then he's got no way back to that village. Because one of the great sins that you could commit in that day was that you would take what is Israel's and blow it in a Gentile place. You lose your inheritance to those that don't believe. And if you marry an immoral woman, again, the same applies. And there's a ceremony to mark it. It's called kezazah. And what happens then is this severing of all connections takes place in front of all the village. They gathered a big pot, put all kinds of nuts and seeds in the middle of it, and then they took it into the middle of the village, probably in the middle of the inn or in the foyer here, and smashed it in front of everyone and said, no longer does this boy belong to us. We don't want we don't want any of the seed that's in him to be in us. So we break off the relationship. Brutal. The prodigal goes to a distant country. He knows, one thing he knows is if he ever wants to go back, he can't lose the money. He can't lose the dosh because there's no way back. Even if his heart softens, there's no way home. So imagine when he does lose the money in extravagant living, not wild. The assumption is that when the older son, he blew it with prostitutes and harlots. The older son doesn't know that. He's just not happy. The word is extravagant living, wild living, but expensive living probably is more accurate. He's blowing the money, all that he's earned, and he's blowing it on whatever. And then it runs out, and then he's looking now for a way home. I need a job because I can't go home without the money that I've blown. I need the money back so I can go back even if I wanted to. And no one gives him anything. He desires to eat pig food because he's that hungry. And then he comes up with the plan. He came to his senses, verse 17. Right, he's standing there one day. I want you to imagine it. How many of my father's craftsmen or hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out, go back to my father. I know, and I'll say to him, what will I say to him? Oh yeah, right, okay, I know what I'll say. This doesn't sound like a repentance to me. It sounds like I'm in trouble, I need some help. Who's going to help me? Father, I've sinned against heaven and earth, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Any chance you could sort me out with an apprenticeship? You know a guy or two. Yeah, I know you know a guy. You're well respected. Can you set me up? I won't be a bother to you. You know, obviously, just set me up. I'll be fine. There's no repentance there. There's nothing happening. He's just desperate. And he's still proud. And he still wants to sort it out himself. Now, see that? There's a very famous painting by Rembrandt, which I'd like you to kind of observe. See this? You can just sit there if you don't mind, Daniel. Illustration to come. So, this older man there is the father. There's the son who's a rogue and is back looking like he's been beat up and in trouble. There's the oldest son, which you've not even mentioned this morning, to the right, but we'll get to him next week. And then there's some people watching. The servants, it's all happening in public. So the picture here is that the son comes into the intimate space and is sorrowful. Daniel, this is my son. We're going to pretend he's been in a distant country, Leeds, as it happens. And I haven't seen him for a little bit, but now he's back. This is actually true. I haven't seen him for a little while. He's been studying. So, Daniel, could you just come and repent here? Oh, this actually this feels better than I thought. So just get on your knees there, sunshine. Oh, yeah. And this is the Father's love. So hands are on shoulders. He's come into the space, and there's people around watching. That would be enough, wouldn't it? That's a good thing. Surely that's the way it happened. Thanks, son. Or maybe it was a different way. Got to move on. We haven't got all day. Thanks very much. Goodness sake. While he was still a long way off, the father saw him, filled with compassion for him, and ran and threw his arms round him and kissed him. And he's kissing him and he's loving him and he cares for him and he loves him, and he says to his servants, "Come, bring the family robe. Bring a ring. Bring shoes." And then he walks him back wearing the Everton scarf, the family robe, walks him all the way back through the village, all the way to the house, and says, "Let's have a party." Who's celebrating? Daniel, thanks very much. Round of applause for Dan. Keep the scarf. He's not come all the way in. The dad's gone to him and he's run. And it says that he ran to him, and men of his stature never ran. He's going to have to pick up his robes and run. He's fast towards his son. And he's got full of compassion, and he loves him with all his heart, and he falls upon him. And look what the son says. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." There's no apprenticeship. There's no working it out. I've got nothing. I'm empty. I've got nothing to give. I'm just glad to be home. Because of the Father's overwhelming love, the Son is received. And he walks him back through the village with all the village watching. He's robed up. He's got the ring on. He says, "This is my son. And I love him. And I care for him. And I'm going to go and get him. And I'm bringing him back into my house. And the village would have said, we've never seen anything like this in all our lives. This is not the way it's meant to be. And he brings them all the way in and he says, this is my boy, come and celebrate with me. They're not celebrating the fact the boy's back because he was a toad. That's a technical Greek word. You can look it up later. They bring him, not you, Dan. We're bringing the family. God, I lost my way. He's bringing him back and he's saying, you are mine. And they're coming to celebrate the father's love, not the son's return. I think they can't believe what they've seen. Next week, we're going to look at the eldest son response and about how that happens. But today, I don't know if your heart's beating like mine is, and my emotions are high. And I feel like the heart of God for each single one of us who's been in a distant land, who's tried to work it out to get on their own, to come back, like some type of religious response. If I go to the meeting, give my money, read my Bible, then God will accept me. And all you have to do is turn up and even threaten to come into this building, and we'll be running out there to meet you. Metaphorically. Once you get in, we'll see you, we'll welcome you, we'll embrace you. And that's what family looks like. And there needs to be more spiritual mums and dads in this house who are prepared to receive whoever walks in through that door. You don't know where they've been, and we're waiting for leaders to do it, or waiting for full-time people to do it, or ministries to do it. Whose job is that? It's yours. If you want to remember and remind yourself that you look like God. Who do you know who's a long way off? Don't stop praying. You don't know when they'll turn. But when they turn, the slightest hint. Hitch your skirts up, ladies and fellas. Roll back the ears to when you were a teenager. And don't pull a hamstring, but start running. And grabbing and holding and saying, you're right back as though you'd never been away. It's as though you never sinned, because love covers it over. Where are you this morning? Are you a long way off? You're present, but your heart's in a distant country. God wants to say, I love your son. I love your daughter. Let me love you more. Let's stand.